Hello, everybody. Welcome to week 6 of notes. Today, we are going to be starting out the Cells and Heredity textbook. We're going to be starting with Lesson 2, Chemistry of Life. So because of the time that we have left in school and what's kind of really important for you to learn next year, we skipped Lesson 1 and we're just going to go right into Lesson 2 in the textbook. If you decided to print out the notes packet that I made, um, it tells you the page numbers in the textbook that each of the chapters correlates to. And again, because we don't have the textbooks, you need to use the online textbook resource. And I talked about that in my other video, my hello video this week. And there's directions posted on Google Classroom as well. If you need any help getting to the online textbook, please reach out to me and let me know. So if you decided to use this handout, this packet that I made, it's, you're just going to do what we did in class. You're going to follow through and you're going to fill in the boxes where you're supposed to fill out. But you are also more than welcome to just create a science learning journal, take some lined paper and staple it together, or take a spiral bound notebook and write your own notes. And this will be good practice for you for next year, because I know a lot of the 9th grade teachers just have the students record their own notes on notebook paper. All right, so we're going to start out on page 2 if you are using the packet. And this book starts out talking about biochemistry, which is chemistry of our bodies. All right. And this might be a little difficult for some of you because you actually haven't really learned much chemistry yet. But we're just going to focus on the basics, like an atom. An atom is the basic building block of all matter. Everything is made out of atoms. So not only living things, but non-living things as well. They're the smallest things that exist in nature. Okay, so if you break down any substance to its smallest components, they're going to be atoms. Different types of atoms are called elements. Okay, elements have their own properties. So examples of some elements would be gold, silver. Those are metals that we can find in the ground and make jewelry out of. Oxygen is in the air, we breathe it. Okay, those are examples of different elements. So there can be one oxygen atom, there could be one silver atom, one gold atom. This is what an atom looks like. Okay, in the center are the neutrons and the protons, and then the electrons orbit around the center of the atom. Interesting fact, the mathematical equation for this orbital pattern is the same as the planets orbiting around the sun. So it's kind of neat if you look at our universe in its largest form and then you look at our universe in its smallest form, they're the same. So it's kind of I always thought that was really kind of mind-blowing. All right. Oh, underline that. That's important. Here's a periodic table of elements. If you've never seen this before, these are all the natural occurring elements on Earth. Okay, and again, these can exist just alone as one atom, but they naturally want to bond with something. Okay, and when they bond with another element, they turn into a molecule. So a molecule is just a group of atoms that are held together by chemical bonds. A molecule that's made out of two different types of elements we call a compound. A good way to remember that is if you think about compound words. Compound words are two different words put together. So a compound molecule would be two different types of elements put together. So I made these little pictures for you. So let's say you have an oxygen atom and then another oxygen atom. Well, they want to bond together. And this you'll learn more about next year, but it has to do with their electrons. The electrons have a negative charge, and depending on the amount of electrons they have and the orbitals that they're in, it gives that molecule a certain charge. So they're going to be drawn to other molecules and want to bond together with them. They don't like to be by themselves. So oxygen gas is just two oxygen atoms bonded together. Carbon dioxide is a carbon atom and 2 oxygen atoms, and they bond together to make a molecule, okay? And that's a specific type of molecule called a compound because it has different types of elements in it. This one is not a compound because it's got just 2 of the same element, oxygen. All right, okay. The 4 elements that make up living organisms are carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen. And these are their symbols that you would see on the periodic table. Pretty easy. A carbon's represented by a C, oxygen by an O, hydrogen by an H, and nitrogen by an N. Okay. That's 96% of all organisms. That's all we're made out of. Those 4 atoms, 4 different atoms. And the way you put them together and the way they're bonded together to make different molecules make up humans and everything within us. So just a reminder, a single element is just one atom, okay? A molecule is when you have more than one atom bonded together, okay? Compound would be when they're different molecules. These would just be molecules because they're the same element bonded together. A macromolecule is just a really big molecule. It's many, many atoms bonded together. So it would actually be little molecules that are bonded together to make a big macromolecule. All right. There are 4 main macromolecules that make up human bodies and all of our food. All right. Carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids. All right. These are very, very important in our bodies. So we need to get them from our food. That's where we get all of our nutrients from. And they do different things for us. So carbohydrates are sugars, starches, and fiber. So you're going to find them in anything that's made out of grain, all right? So breads, pastas, bagels, wraps, anything with flour in it, all right? Starches can be found in a lot of vegetables. So the more starchy the vegetables, so you want to think of like potatoes and yams, any kind of potato is going to have a lot of starch in it. And simple carbohydrates are going to be sweet things, sugars, anything with sugar in it. So cookies, cupcakes, cake, candy, right? That's also a carbohydrate. The main job of carbohydrates in our body is to give us energy. That's why we need to eat them. Carbohydrates are the basic source of energy for all living things. And it all comes down to the glucose molecule, which I'll talk about in a minute, which is made through photosynthesis by plants. So plants do photosynthesis, they make glucose, they store it in their body. So if you're looking at a grain, all right, you're looking at a wheat plant, which is a grass, all right, they take the seeds of the wheat and they harvest them and they grind them up into flour, and we turn that into bread and wraps and bagels and pasta, etc. We're taking that stored glucose and we're using it to turn it into our food. So that's what carbohydrates are, and we use them for energy. You can store some of the energy for carbohydrates, but you can't store it for that long. It's usually like a day or two. Oh, I have someone that entered my office hours. How do I pause my thing? Oh, I don't think I can. Okay, I'm back. Carbohydrates, I think we were done with this. All right, next up is lipids. Lipids are fat molecules, okay? So they're going to be found in any foods that contain lots of fat, okay? So butter and any kind of oil is basically all lipids. Cheese has a lot of fat in it. You can think of fatty meats. You can think of fried things, egg yolks, nuts, all those things have lipids in them. So an important property of lipids is they're insoluble in water. That means they do not mix with water. And that's really important because the special lipid called a phospholipid is what makes up our cell membranes. Okay, so that ability to not dissolve in water allows this kind of natural barrier to form to enclose our cells and to protect our cells and to allow certain things to come in and allow certain things to come out. Um, our bodies use lipids to store energy long term. So we store our energy in fat and then it's there if we need it. So we can store this energy for a long, long time, for years. And a lot of animals can do this. Um, we know that bears that hibernate, they will store up a lot of energy in their fat and then they use that to get through their hibernation period. All right, so there's kind of like quote unquote good fats and then not so good. I say not so good because I really don't believe that any of these macromolecules are bad. They're all very important for our body, but everything in moderation. So stuff from animal products like animal fats. So you want to think of like fried foods or really fatty cheeseburgers, fatty meats, cheese, butter. These in large amounts are not as good for our body because it can create other problems and heart problems and stuff like that. Good fats, these are quote unquote considered good fats because it's harder to have like too much of them. Um, they contain some of the essential fatty acids that we need to build our cell membranes. We need lipids in our diet. You don't want to cut fats out of your diet. You need them to stay healthy. So anytime our body is making new cells, which happens all the time, we have to build a new cell membrane. So when you age and you're not getting an appropriate diet, and you're not getting all of your essential fatty acids, you're not going to be able to build as good of a cell membrane as you would if you had, um, an appropriate diet. So this can affect your health. All right. So making sure that you're getting all these macromolecules is really important to your health. All right. Oh, I forgot about this. This is just a picture of it's called a double layer of the phospholipids. Phospholipid bilayer is what makes up the cell membrane. And this isn't what it looks like. This is if you like zoomed in on it molecularly, this is what it would look like. But it allows water to freely come in and out, and it allows certain things to not get into the cell, so it protects it. All right, proteins. Proteins are super, super important to our body. They basically do everything for our body. They build our muscles, they repair bones and tissues, they make all of our hormones for our body. They are a building block for pretty much everything. They run all of our body processes. So, everything that our heart does, everything that our circulatory system does, everything that your nervous system does is run by proteins. Um, they're very, very important. So you can get them from lots of different foods, but foods that are very high in proteins are beans, meats, red meats, chicken, fish, nuts, that kind of stuff is going to be very high in protein. Okay. All right. And then last but not least are nucleic acids. Nucleic acids are just the name of DNA and RNA. That's the type of molecule that they are. They're very important because they carry information for our bodies, and they carry the instructions on how to run everything and how to make everything. Um, you can get a nucleic acid from anything that was alive because it's DNA and RNA. So everything that's alive has DNA. So if you eat something that was once alive, like a plant or a berry or a tomato, it's going to have DNA in it. But we actually don't need to get nucleic acids from our diet. Our bodies make them on our own with usually building blocks from proteins. So you get the building blocks from all of the food that you eat to just make nucleic acids on our own. So we don't actually need to, we don't have to get them from our food. All right, if you're using your little note packet, you want to turn to the next page. This is just talking about molecules. There's two different names that you're going to see. One's called monomer, one's called a polymer. A monomer is just the name for a one molecule. It's like a building block, just one of them. Um, if you put many monomers together, you get a polymer. Poly means many. So when you put them together, you get a polymer. So these would be more simple molecules. So when we were talking about carbohydrates, simple carbohydrates are going to be monomers, or sometimes just two of them or three of them linked together. That's a simple carbohydrate. It's called simple because your body can digest it really fast and get the energy really quickly. So you want to think about eating a piece of candy. You eat that candy, you get the energy from that sugar really quickly. Complex carbs are going to be the polymers. They're going to be your starches and your grains and vegetables. When you eat them, there's fiber in them. Fiber is a really complex carb. It takes a long time for our body to break down. We actually can't even break down all of fiber. So it's going to take longer for you to get the energy out of it. So it's going to last longer. And that's why it's not a good idea to eat candy for breakfast, because you're going to be hungry really quickly, because it's more simple and you're going to break it down quicker. So you want to think about monomers as the building blocks. Think about Legos. Polymers are after you put them all together to make the large molecule. The building blocks, so the monomers of our four main macromolecules, are here. So carbohydrates are built from sugars. Specifically, they're built from glucose molecules. Okay, this is what the glucose molecule looks like. It's very important because this is the molecule that's made by photosynthesis and what's stored in plants. And then we get it in our diet and we get energy through cellular respiration. Okay. And I put that in your notes. I forgot to put it in here, but it's written in your notes to know that this is the glucose molecule. It's a ring structure made out of carbons. Okay, so the C is for carbons and oxygens and hydrogens, and that's it. That's all that a carbohydrate is made out of. And the glucose specifically is a 6-ring sugar. Okay. All right, lipids are made out of fatty acids. Fatty acids are these long kind of chains. They have like a head and a tail. And basically, they're just made out of hydrogens and carbons. All right, there's some oxygens in there. You might have heard of saturated fats and unsaturated fats. That has to do with the molecule. Saturated means that all of the carbons have all of their bonds filled, which this might not make much sense because you guys haven't learned chemistry yet, but it basically just means that all the hydrogen spots that are there are filled up with hydrogens. Unsaturated means there might be some hydrogens missing, and if there's not a hydrogen there, the carbon will make what's called a double bond, and that makes the molecule bend. So these molecules will be like bent, and these ones will be straight. And since these are bent, they will stay liquid at room temperature. So these are going to be your oils. Saturated fats are going to be solid at room temperature, so like your butter or like your fat from like a piece of meat. And these they say are not as good for you. The unsaturated are a little bit better for you. All right, proteins. Proteins are made out of amino acids. This is an amino acid. Um, they link together to make these giant proteins. Proteins are really, really big, complicated molecules. We don't need to get into the details of this. Just remember that a protein is made out of an amino acid. And there's actually 20 different amino acids. They all basically look like this. And this little guy is called the R group. And when you flip-flop that out for another little molecule, it makes a different amino acid. But I'm not gonna ask you that in the quiz or anything. Just know that proteins are made out of amino acids. Here's just some pictures of proteins. So basically, if you want to think of the beads as the different amino acids, so depending on which amino acids you put together, you're going to make a different protein. All right, last but not least is nucleic acids. Nucleic acids are built out of nucleotides. So this is DNA and RNA, and these are the nucleotides, and you put a bunch of these together and you make DNA or RNA. And this is what it looks like. So they look like, the DNA looks like a twisted ladder, all right? These are called the bases, and there's 4 different nucleobases: cytosine, guanine, adenine, and thymine. You're gonna learn all about these. We might touch on it at the end of the year. If not, you're going to learn all about it next year. And then the sides of the ladder, if we go back, are made out of these sugar and phosphates. So this is the sugar. This is called the phosphate group. And then basically this is going to switch out for like different molecules to make a different rung of the ladder. That's what these different colors represent. And those are what your genes are. So, like the different letters, the different combinations will code for a different gene. RNA is really similar to DNA, except it's just one stranded. And it also carries messages. It just can carry messages around the cell, and it can kind of it tells the cell what proteins to make. So it's kind of like a little messenger. It takes the message from the DNA and it brings it to certain parts of the cell to have it basically make proteins, depending on what kind of RNA. There's different types of RNA, but I don't think we'll probably get into that next year. All right, so a couple more terms. Synthesis. Synthesis just means building molecules, putting things together. So this needs energy. Another name that you'll learn next year is called dehydration synthesis. It's called dehydration because they actually have to remove a water molecule to get these to bond together to make a bigger molecule. So it's basically just building things. Think of the word synthesis as building. Okay, so I have these sound effects from last year in the classroom. It's funny in the classroom, not so much here. If you take this molecule and you're putting them together, this needs energy. All right, so this puts energy into the system to put these things together. So when you're building up your body, you need energy to do that. So example of synthesis, if you take amino acids, which are the building block for proteins, put them together and you make a protein, okay? This is called synthesis because it helps build our body. So building your muscles, building your messages to get around your body. Okay. Decomposition can also be called it can also be can also be called hydrolysis because you have to add water molecules to get them to break apart. And this is just breaking down molecules, so breaking down your food. So you can think of if you poured water onto a piece of bread, right, and you just left it there, the bread is going to get all mushy and it's going to start breaking apart because that's what's happening. Those water molecules are getting in between the starch molecules and they're breaking it apart. And that's what happens inside your body, in your digestive system, in your stomach to first start breaking down your food and then breaking it down into the smaller molecules so that it can go into your bloodstream and get delivered to your cells. And that's why we need to drink water. Okay, so this gives us energy. When you break apart molecules, that energy that was stored in that bond is released, and that gives us energy for our body. Okay, so just what I talked about, if you think of a starch and bread, and you break it all apart, you break it down into the glucose molecules, and that gives us energy. Okay, and then that can be delivered to our cells to do cellular respiration. Okay, all right, why do we need to eat? Well, we need to eat to build, all right, to help us grow, to grow new cells when we're getting older and we need to repair our body, to make new cells, to fight off diseases, to make antibodies, to do all those things to keep our body running and functioning properly. We also need to eat for fuel to give us energy to do our daily processes, okay? And for us to function and think and feel normal. So you can actually go quite a long time without food, depending on how much energy you're burning each day. But it can be up to like 2 weeks, I think. But if you've ever gone even just like a day or two without eating, maybe if you were really, really sick or something, you know how much it affects you. You feel very, very weak and run down. Sometimes it's hard even to just get up because that you don't realize how much we need our food for our energy. And then last but not least, why do we need to drink water? Well, our bodies have to have water. We need it for what I just talked about to digest our food and to break our food down. We need it in our cells to run all of the processes. Our body won't work without water. And we can actually survive a much smaller amount of time with no water. It can only be, sometimes it's only a couple days, depending on, where you are and how much you're sweating and stuff. So if we don't have enough water, our cells will start to shrivel up. Our cells can actually have too much water too. That can cause them to burst. All right. So that's why we talk about plants. You can water a plant too much and it causes some of the cells in the plant to burst. So you kind of actually have too much water, but it's pretty hard for humans to do that because our body just gets rid of the water when we have too much of it. All right, and that's it for this week. Again, if you have any questions, please reach out. And I will be posting this PowerPoint in the notes section on Google Classroom this week, later on this week, if it's not up already. All right, guys, take care.